Hey everyone, welcome back to Blood, Guts, and Social Commentary. I'd like to welcome back Creig Mölden to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Today we are going to be talking about films that never actually got released. They were in production and for some reason or another they never actually saw the light of day for public consumption. So our journey is going to begin in 1981 with Atrapados. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. This is an American-made Spanish language film which received some really good reviews when it was screened initially in the film circuit in 1980, then just nothing happened with it. The movie was never able to lock a distribution deal, and almost 40 years later, it has never been released in the United States. But I also looked and I couldn't find it from any other source either.
It's probably, just really hard to find, and there's probably just not a lot of information about it.
Yeah, because I did look to see if there were foreign releases, kind of like what we did with the last thing, because you and I both know the foreign market okay. And I looked and, the only things I can find are clearly bootleg sources for this and nothing legitimate whatsoever.
Yeah, I think for something like this, it would have to be part of the bootleg circuit, unfortunately. When you're discussing these types of films, especially if it's a foreign language film, it's probably going to be a bootleg, and considering that it's a Spanish film, it would probably be hard to find one with English subtitles on it, or even an English dub.
Yeah, because it says it's an American-made Spanish language film, which is kind of weird, because it's only been recently that Hollywood has really started to believe the American audience can handle subtitles with things like The Raid and all of that. So for a Spanish language film to be made in America in 1981, that was like a ballsy move.
A very boldy move, actually.
You wouldn't think that. It's like, oh yeah, most people can read. Well, you think if they're old enough to watch a horror film, they can at least read.
Yeah, exactly. Next we have, from 1988, we have the movie Pulse Pounders. It was originally shot during 1987, 1988. The film was unfortunately caught up in a financial wranglings that followed the collapse of Empire Pictures. The movie has been shelved since that time, although it was screened once on the 11th of August of 2012 at Chicago Flashback Weekend Horror Convention. Including that, the film has apparently never been shown. I think it's basically what it says right there. It's just the production company fell through. So, that's why it's never releasing the light of day. And I'm pretty sure, with something like this, there have been current production companies that were trying to get the rights to it and trying to get their hands on it. But I found it increasingly tough because it's really trying to find out who owns the rights to it.
No, yeah, that's completely understandable, because we saw this a lot in the Lost to VHS episode, which I guess this is your worst case scenario. You spent all that time, money, energy just for things to fall through, either through the fault of the studio or not being able to lock a distribution deal or something like that. So you kind of end up having this cult movie that you didn't really intend to be a cult movie.
Yeah, exactly that. And, the fact that they were able to, conjure it up for Chicago Flashback Weekend Horror Convention. That's pretty interesting because, I guess it didn't cross anybody's mind just to find out who owns the rights to it if they were able to find it. Unless they got like a bootleg or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Chicago Flashback Weekend's pretty big. I feel like they probably wouldn't have done that, but you never really know.
Exactly.
Next up is 1998 with All American Massacre. This was made by the son of Tobe Hooper, William Hooper, who directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. It was a short that delved into the past of Leatherface and his family. Bill Moseley reprised his role as Chop Top in it, and the soundtrack was composed by the guitarist Buckethead, who has that little KFC chicken bucket that he wears on his head and is a really talented guitarist, but that's kind of thing. There was a Kickstarter campaign for this one, and it was launched a few years back to obtain funding for post-production, but it totally failed to reach its goal and therefore has really never seen the light of day.
Well, I think when you look at it, I think that pretty much just solves it right there as far as, why it hasn't really continued. It's still, trying to raise funding for post-production, trying to get it out there. And I think if you even go back, I think I think basically when you're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a lot of people would be very interested in seeing this, even if it's a short. This is something that they would like to see it, and it would be something ultimately they would like to own. But, I think this just lies under the cost of post-production.
Yeah, and there's a lot of movies that get caught up in production hell where they just can't secure funding or something goes awry and things cost more or less than they should have. From what I read about this one, the handful of people that did see it didn't give it great reviews, but there's always been this really die-hard Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan base, especially when you bring in Chop Top. So it's wondering, is it financially viable just off of that?
Exactly. And, something also popped into my head as well. They are also making a prequel film, which is going back into Leatherface's past. So maybe, in a sense, that's why nobody's rushing to get this out, because of the big movie production is coming out. I'm not exactly sure when, but it's supposed to have Leatherface's past.
Yeah, exactly, because I want to say that one's supposed to come out either end of this year or beginning of next, but I'm not 100% on that. There's that, because it was shot in 98, but Kickstarter, I don't know exactly when that happened, but my guess is fairly recent, because Kickstarter has only been super big within the past few years.
Yeah. Next up, we have the 2004 film Concreto, which is Japanese for concrete. It's about a high school girl that is kidnapped by gang lords and held captive for several months. Over this time, she repeatedly is beaten, raped, and tortured. It's based off an actual murder of Junko Furuta. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. And the family has blocked it. Now, when you're dealing with something that's based off in a real crime, that's really getting into the taboo right there. Not necessarily they're shooting a snuff film, whether they're, snuff films are actually real.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with a film that's based off an actual crime, it's going to get a little treachery.
Yeah, because I cut an episode about snuff films, and that was a rough one. And family blocking things isn't totally uncommon. This one, I can understand their grounds a little more, because there was a movie, and it's not a horror movie, but it was made a while back, called Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, where they told the entire life of Karen Carpenter from the Carpenters, and, how she delved into anorexia, and how she ended up dying from that. But it's told with Barbie dolls. So the family obviously wanted to block it, but I think they didn't really have legal grounds to do so. So they ended up kind of doing an end run around them and saying it was a legal use of their music, because it did use Carpenter's music without paying for it. So that's the reason they've been able to block that film.
That makes sense.
Yeah, whereas this one, I think the family has a little bit more of, they don't want to relive this.
No, what family wants to relive, a murder of their loved one, especially if it's, made for TV movie or just a regular movie like this one that's, in a sense, it's fiction, but it's based off a real event.
This movie in the past, on the part one of those videos I did about horror movies based off real stories, and I couldn't read about half of the things that happened to her just because it was just so grisly. And now apparently there are legs of this going around. I haven't come across one, but there are stills that come up when you look at the case, and most of them are from this movie apparently, and not real pictures of her, even though they're claiming to be, which I don't know if that's better or worse.
Really, with that sort of thing, it's hard to deceive whether the pictures are actually real or not. You would hope to think that the pictures weren't real for that, and they were just using movie stills. But again, if there is that sort of thing, if they were basing it on crime scene photos and they were recreating it, then that would look obviously very, very real.
Yeah, so it's one of those, how accurately do you want to portray it? Because, well, yes, it's this cautionary tale about how miserable and depraved and terrible people can be, but at the same time, is it, where's the line between that and this being exploitative?
Exactly.
Next up is 2006 with Worst Case Scenario. The filming in this began in 2004, but only a little footage saw the light of day, mostly in a couple of trailers that got passed around the horror community like crazy. This movie had a lot of buzz. An official promo was nominated for a Golden Trailer Award in 2006. And some zombie fans, like the folks at Eat My Brains, dubbed it the best trailer they'd ever seen. Unfortunately, the production for this was canceled in 2009. The director basically wrote on the YouTube description for the trailer saying after so many years of trying to fundraise for this, he just gave up. And the source I had for this was Looper, but I also have the screen cap from the YouTube source, which I'm putting up right now. This ended up kind of turning into Frankenstein's Army. But if you look at the trailer for this and look at that movie, it's obviously a different story, but it has a similar feel with the monsters.
Upon reading this, it made me ultimately think of the Sleepaway Camp, the fourth film that was supposed to come out. They only shot a little bit of the material for that, and then, they lost the funding for the film. And laid I guess in a vault for so many years, and until, I guess, Anchor Bay bought the rights to the films and they put out a release where they released everything. I'm sure you remember they released everything, a Red Cross medicine box. It wasn't really a Red Cross medicine box, but, it had, the Sleepaway collection. It had the first film, second film, third film, and then they included a bonus disc where they had the stuff that they already shot for the fourth film on there. But I mean, that's just kind of what it reminds me of. But with this case is they just ran, the production was canceled and nothing really became of it. But, there was still interest gathered, and, perhaps maybe it will come out one day. Maybe if he starts a Kickstarter program, and there gathers a little bit of interest, maybe start filming again if he can get the funds for it.
Yeah, because I must have bought my Sleepaway Camp box set in a weird thing, because it's not the Red Cross one, because I got mine post-lawsuit, because Red Cross actually sued over the box, so it got taken off the shelf. But I still got that. Yeah, but I still got that fourth production disc. And it's the thing, I've owned that box set for over a decade now, and I tried to watch that thing once, and I've just gave up, because when he says they just released the production, he means that's what they did. It is just take after take after take. There's barely any editing. You're just watching the same scene 20 times.
Some people will still find that interesting, even so, and they'll try to piece together, the best way they can. And I'm sure there'll probably be somebody out there that'll take all those scenes and take all the takes and kind of morph it into, some sort of film with that.
Exactly, because production footage is amazing if you're an aspiring director, I'm sure, and you just can kind of learn and see and what works and what didn't, and how would they redo that take and all that, which was one of those I couldn't sit through it. And it's been removed later on, I'm not sure when it got removed, but so if you don't have that disc, all you're missing is a lot of unedited footage. But yeah, worst case scenario, I remember this got passed around UHM a lot, and everybody was super psyched for it, but just ending it couldn't get off the ground. This concludes part 1 of our look at horror movies that have never actually been released. Like what you're hearing? Please give a thumbs up, subscribe, anything like that. If you don't like what you're hearing, please drop a comment, let me know. Thank you.